You're watching Morning at NTV.
Thank you for keeping with us. I'm Karagawa Bodums, and we're coming to you live from the Kampala International Conference Center. And the big story is an extract from one of our news dailies. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda recognizes equality between women and men. Specifically, it provides for gender balance and fair representation of marginalized groups, recognizes the role of women in society, accords equal citizenship rights, freedom from discrimination, affirmative action in favor of women, and articulates specific rights of women, including outlawing customs, traditions, and practices that undermine the welfare, dignity, and interests of women. And Uganda developed a national gender policy in 1997, and it has been revised through the course of time. As an effort of being pragmatic in addressing the gender disparity in the country's political sphere, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda provides for reservation of one seat for a woman, member of parliament, for each district. And we apparently have 112 districts, implying that they are unopposed 112 seats in the House of Parliament for women. And at least 1/3 of local council seats are reserved for women, and this has resulted in increased number of women in leadership and decision making. Currently, the Uganda Parliament has 154 women and 295 men. 46% of committee chairpersons are women. 43% of committee vice chairpersons, 35% they are full state ministers who are women, and 50% are commissioners. Why am I saying this? On today's big story, we pick on the insightful article that was written on Monday 19th March by a lady called Jackie Kemigisha in the Daily Monitor. And she makes a case through this article, and she's seated here with me, asking that has affirmative action hindered women's participation in politics? And I want us to extrapolate this case. Let me just read just a slight brief, like 2 paragraphs of that article. She says that in the current parliament, women occupy all key positions of power. The Speaker, Rebecca Kadaga, the Leader of Opposition in Parliament, Winnie Kiza, and the Government Chief Whip, Ruth Nankabira. The Government Chief Whip is in charge of the Cabinet, which is the executive. The Speaker leads the second arm of government, which is the legislature, and the Leader of Opposition in Parliament heads the opposition MPs. Of course, it's only the judicial sector that is not headed by a lady in that regard. So why isn't this power reflected in the policies and laws passed by Parliament? The 10th Parliament has bills like the marriage and divorce bill still collecting dust on the shelves. The sexual minorities bill still hasn't been passed into law, and the minimum wage bill is not on the priority list. I'm expecting Honorable Amoding, also Monica, to join in this discussion. However, she hasn't yet arrived, so if she joins in later on, perhaps within these 30 minutes, it will be good. However, I believe Jackie is brilliant enough. I need her to extrapolate this particular discussion. So help us advance the case of your argument, because I would expect that you'll be applauding the government and the efforts done to make sure that the equalization of the political space for women and men is a great, fabulous thing, and there isn't much negative issues really to talk about there.
If you read the article, I'm not disagreeing with affirmative action. I am just simply saying that affirmative action as a policy is not cast in stone. Mm-hmm. It's something that needs to be reviewed over time.
Yes.
And the key cases that I'm also trying to make is the fact that we have, when we talk about affirmative action and and representing women and having seats for women in parliament, most of the time we forget to address why this is an issue. So the political and social structures in place that are causing this are not really addressed most of the time. So what I'm simply trying to say in that article is that we can go back to the drawing board, look at the policy, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And then from there, we can see where to go. Because I totally agree with representation of women. And affirmative action as a policy is something that is a policy in place that has helped advance that. So I'm not anti-affirmative action. I'm just saying that, like many of our policies, we need to go back to the drawing board and have these conversations that lead to better policies. And if you continue, I suggest that if we are going for affirmative action and having women in parliament, why not just come up with a policy that says, oh, representation has to be 50-50, 50% men, 50% women.
So your presumption is that because you have a dominant presence of women in the political circle, especially in parliament, is that whatever your interests as women are, they are actually supposed to be met with immediate effect, or perhaps in this period of time. And don't you think that is an erroneous burden on these MPs, and you're trying to push a very exclusive agenda in terms of expectations? Yet we are working in a general framework of the country that we cannot exclusively just put focus on women's issues. Women are working with men to ensure that certain things are done. And of course, several things are done in the country. So you need, I think you're being extremely harsh and unrealistic. I think these women have done tremendous work.
I actually think you're making my point for me. I'm not saying that the women haven't done good work. I'm not saying that policies haven't, laws that in favor of women haven't been passed. I'm just simply highlighting that the fact that people keep on making reference, and if you read the article again, you'll see that I am trying to make the point that when people talk about women issues, the burden lies on the women in parliament. Yet that shouldn't be the case. But with policies like affirmative action, they've redistributed and even genderized issues. So when women are dying, that should be a human issue. That should be a national issue. People shouldn't now say, what are the women MPs saying in parliament? They should be saying what are members of parliament. But because we haven't looked at the policy and had deeper conversations on why people are now categorizing issues and like putting agenda to certain issues. And this is why I'm saying the policy needs to be reviewed. Because if we have, and you're making my point for me, and when I start by saying that this 10th parliament is very unique in any sort of parliament in the history of Uganda, is because the power is centered in the hands of a few women. But that does not reflect in terms of the policies. Why is that? And that is why I'm making the point that the structure, the social and political structure is still a gendered institution. So
but it's you who is pushing, it's the women who are pushing for the genderization of politics and literally everything. You're talking about, gender egalitarianism, you're talking about liberation, you're talking about equality in all aspects. And definitely women have profoundly benefited from that arrangement, yeah? Even if their political influence is not generating the results that you're talking about. So you're still insisting that we need to have affirmative action.
Yes.
But actually there are many arguments that are being made that by pushing for that kind of exclusive promotion and attention about women, it perpetuates the understanding that actually women cannot do this through proper competition. So don't you think we should disregard this political influence shortfall and we concentrate instead on the social and economic gains? Because, maternal health, maternal fertilities, infant mortality rates, all those particular, women issues are coming to be better in the course of the years. And we're asking ourselves, is the lack of proper or effective political influence by women, in the expectation that all issues regarding women should be met, is overriding the other gains that have been actually attained?
So let me just make one thing clear to you. The center of all decision making is political. So when you talk about the health sector, when you talk about maternal mortality, when you talk about economic well-being of women, who passes the budget? Politicians. Who is in charge of in charge of capital? Where is the center of all the decisions? So you can now not say that women should be removed from the aspect of political decision making that has a direct impact on everything that on their day-to-day lives. Who makes the laws that in turn discriminate against women? Politicians. So you cannot in any way say that because progressively things have been going well, so how about we leave affirmative action out and then now focus on what? Economic development, when the power centers are headed by men. So it doesn't work at all.
But do you understand the principle from which affirmative action is based? That you are trying to bridge or to make sure that you fill up a gap and harmonize certain disparities in society that have occurred either because of historical misfortunes or kind of social arrangements. So affirmative action has been here for over 30 years. And I would have actually expected that in your case, you even say that we need to do away. Let's discard affirmative action, because whatever we are seeking to be realized is actually not even in satisfactory terms being realized after 30 years. So let's discard that, get back to level grounds, because one of the arguments is that some women have actually colonized and taken advantage of this particular affirmative action policy. Like, of course, the head of parliament, the speaker of parliament, that she's a woman parliament perpetually. No one else is likely to have the success to get her out of office because of the political capital she has gained, because of too much of the state infrastructure that supports her. And so we're getting back to the same problem of state power abuse, of all this. So why don't we do away with it? Kadaga stands against somebody else, either a man or
Again, you're making my argument for me.
So we should scrap actually affirmative action.
No, you're making my argument for me. I'm saying that the policy needs to be reviewed. And in reviewing the policy...
And be scrapped?
No, it needs to be reviewed. There can be a cap in terms of how many times you get to run on the seat, because you clearly mentioned that the history and why the affirmative action as a policy was put in place was to even out, which it hasn't done. So if your solution to something that hasn't worked is to discard it and not replace it with something else that is working, then that's just ridiculous.
No, but if women have studied, we are going through the same schooling system. By the way, by this time, the output of educated brains, the human capital that is trained, is at parity with men. You would even find that in some particular courses that ladies come out far in bigger numbers and better, intellectual capacity. And so I'm asking you that if you're insisting that we should maintain this affirmative action, and yet you have all these other factors dealt with, the disparities and the misfortune that happened in the history of time are being now kind of phased out. Why should you insist that you should be kept under a favorable care eye by the law system and by our politics, other than to get into the
So I'm thinking that you're coming from a point of view where you think women and men are equal in Uganda. Is that your foundation of your argument?
Yes, the equity is getting realized.
No, does getting realized mean is realized? And so, because then I can respond to you that way.
Okay,
so what are you trying to say?
So you make your response. My argument is that we need to scrap off affirmative action. Because you made a case that it is actually failing in so many instances to make satisfactory gains for women, yet that is what was expected earlier on. So why don't we scrap it and we have simply a harmonized political system that gives total equity to all men and women, because we are all now fully empowered, than to try to make an exclusive attention and agenda for women, and men are looked at as now aliens and perhaps some kind of scoundrels in this country.
One thing that I need you to know is that equality hasn't been anywhere near achieved.
Why?
Or getting there.
Why?
Let's look at clear examples. You have a member of parliament who is advocating for violence against women.
That's one person. And this is an attitudinal issue.
Please. We can look at the numbers. In fact, UBOS recently released a report in terms of the numbers on violence.
And it was it's an attitude assessment. It's not you have gone to the field and found out cases.
Where does this attitude come from? Because I feel like you're addressing the symptoms and not the root cause.
Yes.
One thing that we have to agree is that we live in a patriarchal society. And a patriarchal society basically pushes for male dominancy.
So you want a matriarchal society or what?
Let me finish my sentence before you interrupt me.
Yeah?
So I'm simply saying that the power is already, the playing field is already not even for men and women.
How?
We can even look at the clear examples of how many over 20 women are murdered, and where where is the progress of that?
But Jackie,
can you imagine if there were 23 men that had been murdered?
No, men are actually killed, though, through crime. They're
God.
killed in different cases. They're taken to war zones. So, because, you see, Jackie, if you use a social justice kind of mishap, killings, these are criminal conducts. These are criminal acts. The issues of perhaps getting inadequate returns in the political realm, these are political social imbalances that are not necessarily going to be solved by women because, as you have highlighted, that you have so many women in power, and they all turn out to be like men because power has a way it intoxicates people who are in that power realm. So why don't we deal with a collective 360 degrees campaign that this needs to be sorted, men should be involved, this and done to make the man think that actually this is women's fight.
It's so interesting how, irrespective of all the representation in whatever aspect of society, you still think the man is not represented. I find that fascinating. Why? Why do you feel that the man is being left out? Name one sector, or name one aspect of society, or community, or power dominancy, or even the centering of capital where men are not represented.
No, you see, the campaign is actually driving towards that because you have gone
towards representing men or
to
representing
have
women?
a displacement of men in the public realm.
How
to
is
the
it
point
a
that
displacement of men? I'm
you
curious.
See, if you go to corporate offices right now, there's a pressure to hire women. Okay, because of this. I'm telling you this because of experience of what I'm going through. It's not that I'm being biased about it, but it's if the insistence on making sure that you get redress to your own dissatisfactions as women, and you keep on pushing this that it's women issues, men should get out of the way, or if they are not to be of help, they should come actually and simply be behind our own agenda. So you mean men don't have an agenda themselves?
No, it's ridiculous that your counter argument to women's representation
no, it's a discussion because I need
is to simply
this
highlight.
Is your article,
no, yes,
and
yes,
I'm trying.
But I'm just saying
you cannot
that
make an argument against a case, and then you turn around and say you still support it.
First of all, I don't think you've understood the article. That's one thing. My article is a critique of affirmative action. Now, a critique can mean to build onto something that already exists. Affirmative action is very much needed in this community that we are in. So that cannot be done away with. My article is just simply highlighting that our institutions of power are still genderized, and that women are still not, irrespective of being at the centers, the power is not trickling down. And that means that resources are not trickling down. It means that people who still hold the biggest chunk of resources, it's under the control of men. So my article is simply saying that, one, we need to go back to the drawing board and look at affirmative action as a policy and see what has worked, what hasn't worked. What do we need to review where? My article does not state anywhere, if you've read it clearly, that we should do away with affirmative action.
Exactly, and for me that's what I'm proposing, that based on the preponderance of your argument, that actually the solution should be that you should scrap that. Now, I guess you understand properly the political dynamics of this country. Yeah, you're part of the Parliamentary Watch, and you're the head of Center for Policy Analysis. You're the head of content, rather, Center for Policy Analysis. Are you aware, or perhaps it is presumed on my part, that actually women are under capture by the political system in this country? That parties, especially now, the party in power, based on facts, gets women and uses them as political capital tools for their own agenda, and the agenda that will be pursued is actually for political interests of the party, not necessarily entirely for women. So if you keep on insisting that women should be actually at the forefront of everything and they should have a revision, that they should have term limitations on this particular aspect, yes, yet you're hearing that there is a pursuit of, there has been a pursuit of eliminating political terms of different people. I think you're having kind of a distorted argument in this particular place, because even if you bring more women, for me, I've argued, they will actually be captured by the interest of the people in power.
Again, you make my argument for me, and I'm just everything you keep saying, you keep supporting my argument.
No, I'm not.
You do, because what I'm simply trying to say is that a policy needs to be reviewed, and I'm looking at the power structures. I'm looking at how to review the policy to better suit women representation, to better suit the women's needs. And you make the argument that political women are being employed as political capital, and that's something that we can address in the
the policy,
in redrawing a policy.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just saying, and you keep making my arguments for me, pointing out what needs to be done and how it needs to be fixed, and that is
and it cannot be fixed by revising that.
That's what's precisely I'm trying to say.
The principle of affirmative action is a temporary redress to a historical either misfortune or kind of imbalance that is there. And it cannot be a policy in perpetuity to fix that problem. Me and you, whoever is watching, can actually make a very serious conclusion and say these people are at the same level either of understanding and competence. So it should not be that I'm going to be subjected under such disfavor if we went for a political kind of competition between me and you, and somebody insists that she should get a political favor that passes out to parliament freely because she's a woman. And yet here we have, I guess, the same education. We have the same kind, perhaps, of corporate experience to some extent. Perhaps that's my assumption. Why don't we? Yes. So you want to say you're less of me in that regard, in terms of competitive capital?
No. Yeah, of course. Do you know how many banks require you before you get a loan to have any male presence? In terms of, let's look at even political capital. One of the reasons why women are not participating in politics is the lack of capital. So are you saying that when you look at between you and I, we have the same capital? Or we have the same access, or we have the same privileges? When you go to campaign, the hindrances that are in your way are very different from mine. Do you get men heckling at you, saying how pretty you are, or focusing on particular attributes on your body?
Oh, women can do that, by the way.
No, but I'm just saying that what level do you get when it comes to people attacking who you are as a person? If you were an unmarried man and you were running, and I was an unmarried woman, who would be on the receiving end of the shorthand?
That's just a social factor. Anyway,
yeah, but you can't simply
conclude your case,
you can simply paint over social factors and the role that they play in a patriarchal society, and now simply say that we've achieved equality. No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
We have to, and that's my argument in the article. I'm simply saying that we have to address the structures in place, both political and social, and look at the foundations of the patriarchal power that is in favor of men.
Okay, lastly, because you keep on referring to patriarchal power, and every person who is gender-based kind of campaigning, an advocate of that issue, keeps on referring to patriarchy. So what is the objective of affirmative action or gender-based campaigns? Is it to destroy patriarchy? Is it to neutralize patriarchy? Is it to generate a matriarchy for society? So just as your last submission. And
that's interesting. I wish we could destroy patriarchy as a system. I mean, if that was the goal of affirmative action, no, I would say hell yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
But
which is sad. That's the
how is that sad? No, because you'll be on the receiving end of privilege.
You would have a devastated world if you don't have fathers. Conclude, yes.
Anyway, I'll just go back to the article. I'm just simply saying that, and these are conversations that we need to have in terms of trying to go back to critique the systems that are in place, to try to go back and not only water wash the things that are in place, but go back to the causes and then address issues from the causes. And I totally support affirmative action. And for me, I wish that if affirmative action was reviewed as a policy and they said 50-50 men, 50 women, I can say that's now equality. But we're falling under the trap of where 30% representation of women is referred to as equality. And I could see you in that trap as well.
No, it's not a trap. But thank you, Jackie. Brilliant and impassioned discussion. And please continue. We need such brilliant, provocative ideas. Keep on writing. Hopefully I will land on one again and call you back. And thanks our viewers for keeping us as your number one station. This is Morning at NTV and I'm Karaga Bodwins. Let's go for a break and continue.